Hello, I'm Kelsey. I'm the Occupational Therapist, and I'm here with Mr. the Occupational Therapist.
You can call me Josh if you want.
You can, but he prefers it if you call him Mr. the Occupational Therapist.
Is that the intro you want to go with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Authentic.
This is like take 5.
I keep it authentic on this page. It's important to me. So we thought that there were some things that we could talk about better as a parenting dyad than just me writing about them by myself. And we thought that conversational would probably work better than trying to co-write something together. So we're giving this a try. Talking about, we have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. I call them Apollo and Summer on this page. You have experience working with kids, though not in an OT context, but kind of a span of experience from young kids to like teenage age. You want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, so I have spent most of my life as a gymnastics instructor. I was teaching kids when I was a kid and kind of grew up with that and taught through high school, college, the first 10 years after college. Taught gymnastics primarily to, anywhere ages 3 to 15, 16, and then was also a youth pastor of high school students. Mm-hmm. So have my professional expertise sort of lies in a different side of the developmental
yeah, definitely trending toward older and, if not necessarily older and or more capable of like following like structured
very structured.
Yeah. I tend toward the more younger side of things and or the kids who are like having a lot of trouble with structure or routine in something because they're in school and they're struggling.
Yeah, most of the kids that you deal with in your work would not thrive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't have done well in gymnastics or in like structured sports or things like that. And we come from different parenting backgrounds, like as our own self as kids. And while the like stereotype is that like the man or the person socialized as male in a partnership or a co-parenting
breadwinner.
Yeah, co-parenting partnership is usually the breadwinner, the like stricter one with the kids, yes. and all those kinds of things. But right now I'm the one who's the working parent.
Winning the bread.
The one who's the working parent, and you're the one who's the stay-at-home parent right now.
Yes.
Although I have been in the past. It has been the opposite in the past, but it was when our kids were babies. And also, I come from a household of a little bit more control.
Yeah.
And you come from a parenting side.
Not laissez-faire.
That was, like...
Not
necessarily permissive parenting, but close to the line there. I wouldn't say
permissive, but... laissez-faire.
Yeah.
There's
laid back.
Yeah. He ain't getting into problems. He ain't getting in trouble.
That part of that was because you were a really laid back child.
True. Yes.
But I was also a really laid back child.
But that, yeah. So we have
or maybe not a laid back child. I feel like my mom would watch this and be like, "Are you kidding me?" But I was a very eager to please child and a naturally compliant child.
Yes.
But that didn't affect because I was the oldest, so my parents were still felt like they needed to be.
We both had similar personalities
as kids,
but different parenting styles. And how
the adults around us reacted to it pretty differently.
Even though we were similar.
Both pretty chill. Not chill, but
compliant.
I was not chill. I was super not chill.
I've seen the home videos.
How do you feel like the way you were parented influences you as a parent?
Well, it's always there because that's what you know, right? Mm-hmm. So you're either working toward it or you're working
to not.
You
either want to emulate.
Yeah. Because you're either thinking like it may not even always be conscious. Because I think people either they do what they know, or it was such a bad experience that they just
don't want to do that.
They don't want to do that. They may not know what to do, but they just know this is not what I want. And so I think the influence is definitely there. I think for me personally, I don't feel like a lot of that is conscious to where I think I am trying to be like my parents or I am trying to not be like my parents. Now there are times where that is the case.
Yeah.
And probably more in the frame of this is a way I don't want to be like my parents. And that's not even necessarily that's not a bad thing.
Maybe the more easier thing to think, because if you are just like, this is a good way that adults interact with kids, you might not necessarily attribute it to, this is a good way my dad did this with me, but you're just like, oh yeah, this is the good way to be in the world. But then if you're like, I remember when my parents did X and it really, you know, really hurt me when they did that, then you're like more likely to like connect it with the person.
Yeah, and it's like not necessarily even like things that are wrong. It's just like, these are things that don't fit my children. Right. Because you parent different kids differently.
True. Our children are very different than either of us were as children.
You know, so, and I think that as grandparents, my parents tried to grandparent the way they parented. Yeah. And there are some elements of that where I'm like, that doesn't work for my kids. Yeah. As well as it did for me. You. Or even just like, that's not a value that I want necessarily to be as prominent as my parents may have made it. And to give a specific, so people aren't just like, oh, what was it? Just like, I think really my mom loves to give gifts. There are 2 boxes on their way right now, like somewhere as we speak, because she messaged me the other day and told me that she was sending 2 boxes. And like Christmas was like, if the living room wasn't full of wrapping paper at the end of like you could barely see the tree level of things, and we're more like, here's like 3 presents and one of them's a book. We just have like a more of a minimalist, like, which is also a little bit practical because your parents lived in one place that they wanted to live for their whole life. Yeah. And we want, like, we've been kind of nomadic in our life, and so like, even just from a pragmatic standpoint, our thinking about like toys and stuff isn't like, we want to have tons of them. We want to keep them for our grandchildren. But your parents genuinely did. They did keep the stuff that was your stuff for their grandchildren. So it wasn't like it's not just like, oh, they're excessive and we're the value better. Is different just, because the context is different. And so, so you have those like conscious things in your mind where you're like, oh, I'm gonna do that differently when I'm parenting. Yeah, but and then just so we're talking about the positives too, the number one thing where I think like, specifically, I know that I was like, hey, I want to be like my parents in this, is like, you tell your kids when you got it wrong. Yeah. And you just say, hey, I messed up. That's important. You know, forgive me. Right. You know, I can think of a couple of different times in my childhood, like specific instances in which my parents said, hey, I screwed up, will you forgive me? Yeah. And like, it's powerful to a kid. Yeah. Because it makes you realize, because you I think as a kid, you just kind of have this thing like, oh, your parents don't. They don't, it's not like that's a real thing that shows that respect is going both ways. Right. It's not that as a kid, you're not like, oh, my parents don't ever do anything wrong. Right. Because even like as a kid, they yell at you and you're like, oh, you might think they did. Yeah. Yeah. But you feel wrong about it, but it's kind of it's okay for parents to do that, but not for kids. And this really showed that you're like, hey, you know, I could have handled that better. Yeah. And, you know, I did not put you in a position to succeed. Right. And that's something that, you know, we need to do better. Yeah. On next time. And understand that it's as a parent, you're not always going to get it right, but you're just going to do the best that you can and learn from times you have that you didn't get it right. Yep. And that's something that I've tried to really inculcate in my own parenting. I have more things from my childhood experience that maybe it's easier for me to come up with things that I don't want to carry over into the way that I am parenting. Yeah. But I didn't know that when we started parenting. I kind of really thought that I wanted to be exactly like my parents. Like I really hadn't had any time to come to terms with disagreeing with anything that they did or thinking that there was a different way that I would do things. I really felt like before our kids were born, I really felt like my parents were pretty much the A+ model of parenting and your parents were way too chill. Did you do something to change me because you saw that I was don't think so. Gonna be like too controlling or like too? No, I don't. Because a lot of people people are in that situation. Part of the gender thing here being kind of backwards with us
And a funny, like, aspect of that is that another part of the gender thing is that the vast majority of people who read this page are women. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them have a husband who they wish would be gentler or more respectful or more mindful. Mm-hmm. Or they feel caught, maybe even because they're like, they want to be respectful of their husband. They can see where he's coming from. They obviously don't want to, like, be choosing the kids over the husband. And it's not always a wife and a husband in that direction. Obviously, it's not with us. But that is a common thing in, like, comments and people talking to me and stuff. But they want to know how to, like, disagree with their spouse or, like, how to, like, give them some suggestions on how to be gentler or how to, like, tell them child development things because their parent, the other parent, maybe not even have, like, reasonable expectations of what the kid can do. Do you feel like there was ever a time where you had to, like, try to, like, intervene or, you know, like, try to tell me something, or do you feel like I just kind of found that myself?
We were married for 5 years before we had kids. Mm-hmm. Around
something like that,
roughly.
Yeah.
So there was time, I think, for us to develop our own thinking as a couple independently of our family structures. Mm-hmm. Hypothetically, of course, like theoretically, we hadn't had kids yet, but it wasn't like as if immediately went into to child
and having to kind of copy what you knew.
So I think that there had been enough time. You know, obviously, you were going to school at the time when we adopted Apollo. Mm. That was as you were graduating.
Yeah.
With your occupational therapy degree. Yeah. So I think you had changed some by then simply because you had...
Like a tiny little bit of child development, but there wasn't a lot, really.
Okay.
Just because my degree was not very pediatrics heavy.
True, yeah.
And so I got more from... I have a psychology undergrad degree, and I did more child development in psych, but that was a lot focused on abnormal development and things like that. But I actually really changed most of it when he was about 4 or 5 months old, and I found the concept of respectful parenting in online groups and started, like, reading daily, and that's what really shaped my thinking over time. But there have still, I think that the answer to that is probably that there wasn't, like, some big
there wasn't a big thing. I think there was a commitment to like, we were parenting together, and we were going to agree, but we may agree within a spectrum.
Yeah.
Of, you know, not this is the one way to do things.
Right.
But here is a range.
No, we still have
what
things
is appropriate
currently that are on a where you're in one spot on a kind of acceptable spectrum, and then I'm in a different spot, and sometimes I'll stop it.
You're just thinking of dinner.
Well, a little bit. And if that despite the fact that there hasn't ever been some big conversation where we had to be like, hey, I need to intervene on behalf of, like, my kids' safety or whatever. Like, we've never really had a spot like that. We do have places where we just differ. Like, I feel like disagree is even too big of a word, but where we just differ. And sometimes we have had conversations about those where they're too confrontational. And, like, if, like, I'm trying to talk to you in the middle of one of us being triggered by what the kids are doing, that's not the right time for, like, us to be, like, trying to, like, tell the other one to do it a different way.
Yeah.
But it's been more successful when I, like, I'm, like, describing what you do with a kid, so, like, I feel, like, silly saying it, but, like, in a calm, connected time, then I come to you at a separate time, and I say, hey, can we talk about, and I usually don't even be, like, can we talk about earlier when the kid was screaming? But I'm like, hey, in general, it feels like dinner has been a little bit of a struggle lately, or the kid's riding in the stroller has been a little bit of a struggle lately. Is there a different way that we want to do that? Or, like, do you want to think of some ideas of how we could do that better, you know, so that both of us aren't getting, like, escalated by it?
Yeah, it's the very rarely is the time to find out how you want to parent.
In the moment when the kid is freaking out. In the moment
when the kids are like,
kids freaking out, that you is freaking out. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that you have to come to. And you can make those decisions based on different times of life as well. Like what may be the correct decision is, especially in areas where you're talking about where we just like differ on exacts. Yeah. It might be like a particular context is fine. Another particular context requires more structure or control.
Right.
One even differs from child on what the needs of that child are. So it's like there's not a one size fits all or like a certain like exact answer of like this is what is appropriate for all kids at all times, at all ages, at all developmental levels. It's like what works. It's very utilitarian. And that it is about what works at the current moment for your family. And by what works, I don't just mean like what works for the parents, but like also what works for the family unit.
Yeah.
And in a way that leads to like growth and development.
If anybody is having resentment about the situation, I say that's a sign that you need to do it a different way. Because I really, truly feel like there's like a bajillion ways to do things. And, like, societally, we know about, like, 1 or maybe, like, 3, depending on, like, what the thing is. Like, how to have dinner, how to do bedtime, how to whatever, like, and then you can even get more granular, like, how to, what clothes you need to wear to bedtime. Or, like, what, like, super granular things. And there'll usually be, like, if I said categories like that, you could probably say back the one societally most normal or, like, even just stated most normal. What clothes do you wear to bedtime? The pajamas. That's the societal one. But then if someone in your family is not having a good time with that, whether that's the parent or the kid or the co-parent, like whoever it is who's like struggling, there's a million other ways to look at the situation and go, okay, wait, what needs are we trying to get met? Is the problem that this is a baby who will pee at the bed if they are wearing no clothes? Is the problem that this is a baby who is a tiny little baby and they need to be swaddled? Is the problem that this is a big kid who's tired of wearing whatever? Is the problem that the kid can't wake up in enough time to go to school, and could they wear their school clothes? Like, there's like lots of you take the one scenario and you break it into the other parts. But I think people are used to the concept, or people who read the page might be more used to the concept of how to kind of do that collaborating with a kid. But sometimes that collaborating with a co-parent can be really hard because the co-parent might be coming with a lot of different feelings about the way that the conversation needs to go, or feeling threatened by the suggestion that their idea might be not working, or that might make it their fault, or the way that they were raised and how they were parented, and the stories they're telling themselves about whether this means they're being respected or disrespected or defied or whatever.
I think especially there's a lot of, we're not big on tradition. But there are a lot of families. There are a lot of families that's like, this is what we did. This is how we'll do it, and I will not budge on this. And the reason for that is because that's what they know, and that's what feels comfortable to them. And anything outside of that, even if you're like, if you're looking at it objectively, there's a much better way. But a lot of people would, and this goes beyond child development, you were more comfortable with what you know, even if it's a problem, as opposed to something that is new and you don't know,
right?
And because you could be scared of what might happen, that it could be worse. For some people, it might feel like admitting that, well, that means that I was raised incorrectly. Yeah. My parents messed up. That may not be the case.
That was a big thing for me, genuinely, like to have to like admit to myself that like my parents could have done something differently. Was a much bigger thing than I expected.
And you have to understand that your parents probably acted,
and they were
doing
like
the best they could.
Exactly, like they were like breaking the previous cycles, and so like they were like they were a united front. They talked all the time about their parenting strategies, and then the parenting strategies they agreed on were like way more controlling than what I would think and how I want to parent my own self. And so and so I think almost because of how much like thought and consideration they put into it, and all the parenting books they read, and all the parenting books I read because I was a hyperlexic small child, and like literally like conversations they had about it with me, because I was also like weirdly mature, and people would like talk to me about stuff, and they'd be like, oh yeah, we make this decision because that's what we believe based on our morals, and those are based on this, and you know, and so for all, if they had been like, if there had been like parents who were like chaotic or obviously not in control of themselves, I think I could have grown up and been like, they were obviously not in control of themselves, they were overwhelmed, they were da-da-da. And instead I was, you know, for years I was like, they knew exactly what they were doing. They made, you know, they made these choices really intentionally. Therefore, they must have been good
choices.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing to decide you're going to break, but there is no growth without change.
Right.
So, like, if you just choose, like, I'm going to do the exact same thing that my parents did, there's...
Even if you
agree,
even if you choose, I'm not going to do the exact same thing my parents did, but you don't come up with what you are going to do, then you do the thing that when you're escalated and when you can't think of what to do, the voice in your head is the loudest voice that you grew up with.
Yeah.
So when I come up with information and somebody asked, how do we share parenting information with each other in a non-confrontational way, or just new information, not even necessarily we disagree, but like new information. How do we share it with each other? And I read that and it made me laugh a little bit, because I don't know if you've ever shared one with me. And if I want to share one with you, I like post it on the Occupational Therapist. And then you read it. And then maybe if you share it to your personal Facebook page, I'm like, yes, I taught him a thing. And I didn't have to teach it with my voice.
You taught it to me.
No, but there have been like...
It is funny to be like, because I know that you don't always, like, you're not like writing those and immediately pressing publish.
No,
so I'm
not.
like,
yeah, it's
that's
later.
what Kelsey was thinking about a month ago.
But I can remember times... It's funny because Apollo had we'll get to like autism and stuff eventually. Apollo is autistic, and I remember like, so because of that, then there was some extra difficulties with like learning to use a toilet. But I remember when he was like 1 or 2. We were like on a date, and I was like rambling to you about something that I read about potty learning, and how like you needed to like not like, you know, like force your kids to toilet at a certain time, that it could actually be more like difficult for them to like learn like interoceptive body cues and like all of this like jargon and stuff. I like have this, I don't know if you remember this memory. Like I don't know where we were. I can remember sitting at the restaurant, sitting across from you, and just rambling about toilets for like... Excellent.
Like such a like dinner date conversation, by the way.
And it wasn't even relevant is the thing, because he like wasn't even in the age range where anyone thought he should be using a toilet, you know, even the people who think you could do it the earliest ever. And so then like later in our life, when it like became relevant, I was like, oh, I introduced this to you before it was a thing. Like, I got it on the ground floor, so I didn't freak you out when our kid was 3, and I was like, I think he'll get there. If we just let him listen to his body, I think he'll get there. And you weren't like, you absolute crazy person, I've never heard this before, because I had secretly laid the foundation of it at dinner. Yeah,
that particular thing is probably the one thing that like I'm most personally annoyed about. Toileting. It's
a tough one.
I just wish it was easier. But there's no one who's like, man, I really wish my kid just kept going in the diaper. like somewhere the other day was at her nursery for the entire day. And the nursery has been...
Yeah. They've been struggling.
But that's again, like, that's their call. They have asked...
Different rules for different places.
There's different rules for different places.
Kids can learn different rules for different places.
And they had asked that she wear underpants there, because they were going to try to... Like, they're convinced they can do it. And she just doesn't go to the toilet while she's there. It's just fine. She'll go to the toilet, and by that I mean...
She'll use her diaper. Yeah, she'll use her
diaper. Before she goes, she's there for 5 hours, and she'll use it when she gets back. The diaper when she gets back before, but she has a great bladder, I think. At least as opposed to
She's going to be thrilled to grow up and watch this.
And she was going to be there for the entire day because we were going out on a date because it was a holiday for you and you were off work. So she was going to be there for all day, so I took her in a diaper and packed underpants as well, extra diapers. That way it was their decision as to what to do. And apparently they immediately just put her in the one pair of underpants that I had sent. And then they were like, she had an accident and we used the backup clothes. And then on the way home, she had another accident. I'm like, she's not...
Not an accident.
Well, yeah, it's not... accident is the term, but it wasn't an accident. And I'm like, well, if you want to... I don't know, you're not accomplishing anything. You're making your life harder as well. And I would push back against it for the nursery if it bothered Summer.
Her? Yeah.
If it bothered Summer, she don't care.
She doesn't seem bothered.
She's not bothered by it. But I started the story because...
Stand up for her if she was.
Yes. We wouldn't just no. Is that as we were coming home and she was like, to herself, not to me, just to herself, she was like, underwear does not like pee. Or poop. I've not told you this story. Diapers do like pee and poop. Pee and poop is for diapers. Not for underwear. Like that, and I was like...
Just like putting things together.
And I was like... And so I threw out there and I was like, well, what about the toilet? And she's like, no. Like,
that's not
even... Nah.
I mean, she still says she's little.
She's little.
She's a little girl.
She's little.
She tells us that. Different rules for different places is an important thing for people who are co-parenting, not in the same household.
Yes, because they are going to be different contexts.
They're going to be different contexts. You can't, whether you live in the same house with the co-parent or not, you can't force them to parent according to your parenting style. If you get to a point where you think that your child is in danger, then you have to, do something. Yeah, you have to do something about that. But if you just feel like...
Dad lets me run the chainsaw.
Well, yeah, great example of the danger that I'm talking about. But if you get to the point where it's just like, the one parent is stricter with the kids or one parent yells at the kids or one parent, you have to decide for yourself where your line is between which you are, like, before which you're like, it's more important for us to be united versus after which you're like, it's more important for me to protect my kids. There is a line of that. There's not a one-size-fits-all rule to this.
Yeah.
But a child doesn't, like, every parent, every adult, the nursery teachers, the school teachers, every adult in the kid's life is not going to have the exact same philosophies about everything. The grandparents, if they are in the picture, or, like aunts, uncles. People are going to have different relationships with your kid than you do. And it can be a lot more painful, I think, when it's the co-parent who's having a different relationship with your kid than you do, especially if... I think there's two big reasons. One being that if you're the respectful or the gentle parent, then you might get a lot of the brunt of the meltdowns and stuff like that because you're the safe parent. And two, because it can be really hard if you are having like really lovely moments with your child and you're like having moments of delight with them and you feel like the co-parent is never getting that because what they are to the child isn't as safe of a person as you are. And so you feel like if I could just make my co-parent like be my way toward them, then it would make them have a better relationship. But you can't do that.
It's difficult. I can think of it. This is more of a sports context than parenting, but where the kids that I taught would occasionally have part of a class with a different instructor.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Who was
comparison.
More strict than I would be. And you had to, and I'm dealing with kids who are like 10 to 14, basically. And there were some times, and they would be like, well, you would be okay with this. And I'm like, that I wasn't the one in charge.
Right.
And you kind of had to let the kid know the expectations can be different, and that can be that's you can't do that for a kid that's too young.
Right.
But it is an important skill to develop as probably a preteen to teenager moving into a life where they're going to have a multitude of authority figures in different realms, to understand that there are different expectations, different rules, and not to like, they like, oh, this person is better than this person at whatever, but just to understand like different people have different values for different reasons.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily inherently mean they're better at teaching kids or worse at teaching kids. It just means that the thing that they are trying to impart in the way that they do that is different. And that you may have to adjust. Even if you as the kid are like, I prefer the way this person, this person teaches me, or parents me. You still have to respect
all of
what the other person is doing. Like you, not, I don't want to say change your behavior, but you understand that, they're not just trying to be mean to you or anything.
Right.
That's just,
they have a reason for
what they're doing.
Their value.
But that's kind of older kid development.
It is.
Even adults kind of struggle with
it is. And and I encounter that with people I work with, where like there are multiple of the same grade of classroom, but I know that teacher A, and I think teacher A, B, and C are all within the acceptable spectrum of like of a professional teaching relationship with their kid. I'm not concerned about any of them, but I know that one is like has really really great at setting boundaries, great for the kid's safety, a little bit more detached or like a little bit more impersonal in terms of like the way that they are going to be relating to the kids, because they're kind of more focused on like managing the classroom and like everybody being in the right place the right time. And then there's a teacher B is kind of in the middle, and then teacher C is like very affectionate and very caring about each of the kids' emotions, and like it gets really great to the like heart of, but then her classroom is like a lot more disorganized, and so it's like there can be parenting and there can be other
you keep moving out of
sorry
the frame.
I keep scooting back. Other authority figure relationships like that your kids run into throughout their life.
What that ends up doing is that if your kid has each of those things, they get a well-rounded experience.
It's true.
Like there's
everybody doesn't
deficits and strengths to each style, and that's just how people are. People naturally have different tendencies to do different things, different styles. And so long as none of those are abusive or harmful, there's this spectrum of what is appropriate.
Here's an example from our parenting.
Okay.
If I was putting a kid to bed, which I am the bedtime parent.
I prefer that.
But if when I'm not here, if I'm on a trip or whatever, if I'm putting a kid to bed, I'm more, and they're like, "Don't go, I miss you. Give me another kiss. Give me another hug. I want one more kiss. I want one more song."
I'm the softie.
You're more likely to be like, "Okay, one more song. Okay, one more kiss. Okay, one more hug." And I'm more likely to be like, "I know, I love you too. Good night." Shuts door. and neither of those things are wrong or bad. And our kids are not like, if you ask them, they would probably say they prefer you. They do actively proclaim that all day long and from the rooftops.
Yeah.
But I'm not threatened by that. I don't think that they are feeling emotionally abandoned by me. I don't think that they're truly like, my mom doesn't love me. And even when they get older and they can say, well, you don't love me, I know that an unloved kid doesn't actually feel safe to say that to the person who they are worried is not loving them. And so I can honor their emotion that they would like to extend bedtime, and also I would like to not. And that comes from a lot of things. That comes from me knowing my limits, and that I'm going to get tapped out real fast at bedtime if we're just extending nonsense over and over.
Yeah, like you like it now, but you will not like it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The hugs are going to become very clinical. And so I just opt out of it before I even get to that. And you have a lot more patience than I do. But I'm doing a good job with, like, me doing a good job is me saying, I know, I love you too, good night. And not me dragging it out to the point where I start feeling like the martyr in the situation.
Right.
That's not me doing a better job.
Well, and I'm not, like...
I mean, that's what you're doing. You're not feeling like that. You're not feeling the way that I would feel if I was doing it.
Because there's still a point, because the kids aren't ever like, I'm satisfied. Good night, Father.
Sufficient hugs. Goodbye.
Yes, there's it's still more and more and more and more. So there is a point at which I'm like, okay, we're done. I do have a tendency to
deeper well
give
than I do.
them a couple more minutes, and that's fine because it's different personalities.
It is.
It's different. And
they have different relationships with the both of us.
Yeah.
And Apollo will say, like, I want dad. But then if you're not around, he's, like, totally fine snuggling with me. He's, like, he'll just never say it.
Yeah. He loves you.
He does.
Yeah, so that's the...
You spend more time with them anyway. I spend
more time with them.
Because you are the stay-at-home dad. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? What's it like being a stay-at-home dad?
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Had good days, had bad days. When the staying is at home, and the at home is all day...
That's a long day.
It's a long day. It's a really long day.
It's true.
You
cannot drive.
I cannot drive.
I
think I know how to drive a motor vehicle at this point. It has been a couple
years.
I worked 2 jobs for a long time.
Forever and ever and ever.
And then, so we're talking 60 hours a week. And then I moved here and don't work at all for money. But, I used to...
Equal vacuuming.
I used to take care of, 20 kids over the course of a day. And they would come and go. And now I take care of 2 and they never go. They're always there. And it's...
And then if you go away for 15 minutes and then you come back, they're like... Dad! Yes, like they've been abandoned with me.
It was a transition for me. I think that they're at a point now where they one's in nursery and one's in
they're both out of the house sometimes at least. Yeah.
And I love those breaks.
Yeah.
I love currently the one in nursery is 3 days a week, and the times are offsetting of the regular school hours. So there are days where I have them one-on-one.
Right.
It's never a two-on-one. That's going to change. We're going to have to figure that out. Because they both love that one-on-one time.
They get hours of one-on-one time with Dad.
And it's easier. They're raising kids is it's exponential. One, I don't say raising one kid is easy because that makes it sound like it's yeah. But raising 2 kids is more than twice as hard as raising 1.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's exponential. I've heard from people who have more kids that it tops off at a certain point because then
have more kids. That's what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying before the people with 18 kids go to the comments and are like, actually, this is approximately as hard as it was with 17. Then I don't think it's forever.
But just the sense of that, I think. Well, I guess I'll just approach the dad portion of it.
There is a unique component to that because you're kind of left out of the mom groups.
A little bit. I go to a weekly play group with Summer, and it's all moms and me, and they have accepted me as one of their own. We were having pregnancy conversations last week, and
not only do you not have any personal experience, you don't even have any partner experience because our children are both adopted.
Yeah, I'm just not only did I not give birth to kids, I
don't even know anyone. Wait, I was born once. Does that count?
You show up at the hospital and the kid is there.
Yeah, they tell you 24 hours in advance.
It is different because at the playgroup, 2 of the parents were venting about husbands, I think.
Oh,
I think ex-partners, actually. And they're just like, oh, men. And they're like, except for you, who's like
over there in the
over
room.
there sitting next
Yeah.
to. Like, I try to be the exception, and it is because of patriarchy.
So here's a good question. I don't mean to interrupt your thought.
Okay.
But there are a few dads, and there are a few men who aren't dads who follow this page, despite being in the significant minority. What would you say to the people? Because honestly, it's because of patriarchy and everything. It is.
You keep going out of focus.
It is harder for, or there are fewer men who are like looking up and saying, actually, hey, I want to do this parenting in a different way, and I want to be a part of this space for it. So what would you say to them?
Be confident in what you want and what you be the change you want to see in the world. What is culturally the standard typically throughout history has not been what is best or what leads to human flourishing. And it is not. We are so much better. If you look at statistics from like the 1950s, and the number of hours that a dad spent with their kids,
or how many diapers they changed,
whatever, it was like
whatever
nothing whatsoever. So I do want to point out that in this millennium, we have come so far over the course of
are making a big
over
cultural
the
shift.
last 50 years in how men parent. Like it is exponentially
it's true.
better.
Each generation is shaken off.
Men
things.
still don't, as a whole, are not the primary caregiver usually, and that is because they are usually the primary person who is working, and that is usually because men make more money. Men are more likely to be in like job fields that they can be a sole earner. And all of this goes back again to like cultural patriarchy and things that we're slowly, I think, working our way out from, but are still dealing with. And so if you are the primary caregiver as a dad, you're just at the head of the curve. You're not, in a way, you are bucking a trend, but really you're just at the forefront of where that trend is going. And it's not emasculating to raise a child.
And then we have a lot of non-traditional families. We've got families with one parent, families with two dads, no dads. There's like all kinds of different, and so anything that's assuming that it's going to be one mom and one dad, and that's the only, and it's going to be this type of structure, and it's going to be this
children,
right? Yeah, that's completely missing the mark at this point. And so all of the different kind of non-traditional family structures, I feel like also have the Venn diagram between non-traditional family structures and people who are finding respectful parenting and non-traditional parenting styles is probably got a big old overlap. And that's because I think when you have one non-traditional thing, then you're more likely to have multiple non-traditional things. Maybe that's a reasonable segue into neurodivergence, because I know that that our son has an autism diagnosis, like a formal diagnosis. He was the most obvious, like, presentation type of what you think of as stereotypical autism when you can tell in a 2-year-old. How was, like, what was that experience like for you? Because I was actively working with autistic children at the time, and so, like, you hadn't. Not really. You had like 1 or 2 kids every once in a while.
The diagnosis was not going to change anything,
Yeah.
Like it gave a name, and it gave some sort of blueprint forward. It gave access to certain resources. But it wasn't like they went, you have autism, here are all the autism things, and then he changed, and then he changed. It was who he was. So, you know, it's, I think people often think you have to like grieve an autism diagnosis.
That's how they approached it when they told us
they
about
did.
it.
They're
they were
like, we want you to know.
Here's your sad parent support
your son
group.
Has autism. I'm like, yeah.
I had walked into every...
We came to you to tell you that.
I had walked into every appointment being like, hello, my son has autism. We would like a diagnosis so we can get him some help at school. And they were like, okay, well, we'll do this, and then we'll refer you to this person. And then I'd go to the next person and be like, hello, I work with kids who have autism. I'm not allowed to diagnose them, but my kid has autism. My kid is autistic. I say has autism because when I'm talking to medical...
that's the way medical
because I'm getting a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and not just my kid is autistic. It's not.
A different order is not disorder.
It's true. And when you talk about...
That is a whole other hour of conversation just on that one.
Yeah, we can't spin off completely. But there is something to be said for the, there's autism, blah, blah, blah. There's autism spectrum disorder, and then there's, the autistic community and identity, which is not necessarily founded in, a DSM definition, and to which both of us identify in different amounts. We've both we don't have a lot of parents will get a kid with, and the child will get an autism diagnosis, and the parent will go, oh, actually that reminds me of several things in my childhood. Yeah. And then they'll, reflect, or they might seek diagnosis, or they might just self-diagnose. We didn't have a genetic component to make either of us look at that, but yeah, we both still kind of did for separate reasons. I was actually looking at it with myself before we ever had questions about him, because I remember another conversation at dinner with you, because apparently I just spring things on you at dinner
conversations.
Where I had either printed out or copy pasted into my phone a list of things, because where it was originally was on a website that said female autism, and I didn't want you to be influenced by the header of the website. So I handed you the list in whatever form it was and was like, hey, read these. Do they sound like me? Yeah. And I feel like you were like, I don't know, they kind of do, but kind of you were iffy, and I was like, no, they sound exactly like me. And you were like, what are we talking about? I thought we were having dinner.
So yes, both of us have neurodivergent traits.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to talk about mine because I do talk about mine on the page, and I have people comment on the page and say oh, are you autistic, or do you have ADHD? What kind of neurodivergent are you? And I haven't ever publicly said this is the name of it, but I do talk about traits. So I will say, so the one thing that I can diagnose about myself is I'll say I have a statistically significant sensory processing differences, because I've done a test on that. But I will say, hey, I have struggles with sound, and so I do this. Or I'll say, oh, hey, in order to work on energy regulation with myself, I will do this. Or, oh, I had this trait when I was a little kid. I was hyperlexic. I cried all the time. I'll name things as traits without talking about what they could conglomerate into, because I know that I don't fit the DSM definition. I know that a lot of people don't who self-diagnose as autistic. I know that you don't fit the DSM definition, but you do spend hours at home in your office categorizing things on Excel.
I love Excel.
Your favorite things. And so both of us, whether or not we don't want to publicly co-opt something that's not ours. So we both kind of just take these things and say to ourselves, oh, well, okay, well, we can understand that. That makes that make a lot more sense. Or we can see where he's coming from.
A non-medicalized view of autism is more of hey, this is a social disability, in that society is not geared toward the acceptance of autistic people, does not tend to make the concessions isn't even the word I want to use, but it's a social disability in that society itself does not easily embrace the autistic mind.
Yeah.
It would be as if there were no wheelchair ramps into building, which sometimes there's not. So that's a different topic.
In Europe.
All to say that, yeah.
We live in Europe instead of in North America.
Yes. So it is, for whatever neurodivergent traits I have, I do not feel disabled in the social sphere by my neurodivergence. So I'm not going to claim autism as a diagnosis for myself because of that.
But some people would say it's not only a disability.
And that,
some people would say, I'm definitely autistic, but I'm not disabled by it.
And so that's fine.
I feel like people define it for themselves real differently. And there's just like this whole big ongoing conversation in autistic circles and in the internet at large a lot. But also there's some groups in person and stuff. But the internet makes it real easy for communities to find each other. And so there's just this ongoing conversation about it that we're both kind of like have at least like a foot in or a couple feet in, because obviously I do this for my job. So, but we didn't have all of this before we knew about our son. Right. Like this didn't come first. Iffy, or at least it came parallel with. But there wasn't ever any real. I don't know. He just was who he was.
Yeah, you don't have to be scared about it.
I think a big part of it for us could be because adoption comes with so many unknowns anyway, that we were kind of just like...
We don't know.
Because we tried to adopt a baby before Apollo, and that baby had like significant like physical, visible disabilities. And so we were going into, parenthood feeling like we were going to be doing it real different from the get-go. And then that adoption didn't end up happening. And then this one turned out to be more of an invisible thing for a while. But then, I mean, when we got there, it was still just finally like, well, this is what it is. He is who he's always been.
Like, not to downplay the challenges of raising an autistic child, but every child's going to have their challenges. Yeah. And we found the correct label and path for label, maybe a strong word, like name. Found the correct name for it in a way that will help him in society.
Right. Yeah, for him it's important to have like tangible supports around him that doors get opened when you have a word to put to it, and for him to have a word about himself eventually when he can talk more about it. Because that's been another big part of us both kind of exploring these communities as adults too, is being like, oh, that's the same as me. That I have a word to understand. I have a word to like look up to be able to find more information to understand things about this. Will.
That's the end of the questions that you had written down.
Just the end of the questions I had written down. Do you have any last wisdom? I spit wisdom on this page all day, every day, just like constantly. So what do you want to share with the world?
Love your kid. However you parent. Whatever you do, reflect on it and think, was that a loving thing? Did that feel like love?
If my kid was going to define love as that.
Yes.
Would that be?
Did my kid feel loved by that?
And I think when you don't, then like there's room for repair.
Yeah.
Because that...
Oh, kids are resilient.
And repair is like an important, like equally important part of the process, because they're going to screw things up too, and so you want them to have that model.
There are times where I have messed up, and there are times where I have raised my voice to my kids because whatever the reason, can't condone it. So, and like, that was too loud, and then they'll cry. And they'll come sit in my lap and want a hug. And like, that's the both sides of it, is that they felt they, you know,
they could tell you.
Yeah, they felt they could tell me, and they came to me for comfort after that.
And you can
and
apologize.
That's really the sense of like, you know, for me, that tells me that like there was grace for me as a parent when I mess up for my kid. My kid is going to give me that grace. They don't have the language to call that grace or the ability to know what that is, but their innate feeling when they are hurt, even if it's by their parent, is to go to their parent. And that means that the love is
an undercurrent there.
An undercurrent,
that they can
and
trust and fall back on.
It's always outweighing the whatever momentary whatever it is that I do. And that goes back to the thing of forgiveness. I can say I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should not have been loud. And that also then models
how to apologize
for them, because you're not always going to get it right.
I'm giggling because I'm thinking of the time that I screamed at him and he's standing there eating Cheetos out of a bowl, and he's like, "Hey, Mom, you screaming?" I'm like, all right. I feel like no one took what I wanted from this, and now I feel silly. This is fine. I deserve to feel silly. Yeah,
just love your kid, and don't be too serious. Like,
we're both pretty goofy. That is a big part of our parenting.
Yeah, you don't have to be. You don't have to get it right all the time. You can always try to do better the next time. What is the next best thing?
And I think, not to tag on too much at the end here, but I think that having the grace for your co-parent is a big part of it. And especially if you are the respectful one and they haven't come as far in the journey yet, that can be real hard to keep taking on. But if you can find a way with them to be like, hey, if I like tap you on the back and I'm like, hey, do you want me to step in for a sec? I'm not saying that because I'm like, you terrible parent yelling at my kid, get out of the room so I can save the day. And you can't come to it with that attitude either. Right. But if you can like truly look at the co-parent with empathy and be like, hey, why don't you like take a sec? Like, it's okay, I got this. Why don't you take a sec? And and you're both having empathy for your kid, because the kid maybe doesn't deserve whatever's going on. But you're also having empathy for the co-parent who you know is stressed. And if the two of you can talk about that at a time, again, when you're not actively stressed, so that you can tell them that what you're communicating isn't intended to be, I hate your parenting, you're doing a bad job, stop it. But truly, I know what it's like to be overwhelmed, and right now I'm not. Let me take this for a minute so that you can go get not overwhelmed, and then we can all be okay, you know. Then I think that makes a big difference. But you have to not just be seeing it as a it's me versus them. Yeah. It's a collaboration. It's all collaboration.
I'll make this the last thing that I say, because we are
I know we talk a lot. We could talk forever.
Would you treat an adult the way that you
what an
would
idea.
treat your kid? You know?
Someone should say that on their website.
Now, obviously, like, if an adult did some of the things that your kids did, you might. But, you know, just I think of the respect of, this is a human being. It's
a good shorthand. It's not like you can swap that in one to one, but it is a good shorthand for like, well, what would I do if an adult was telling me this, or if you can abstract out exactly what they're doing and analogize it to a thing an adult does, that helps too.
Or if someone treated me like this as an adult, would I like it?
Right. If my boss did this, if my spouse did this, yeah.
Well, you didn't write a closing statement, so good luck winging that.
Oh, well. Oh no, now you've put me on the spot and I've forgotten all the words I know. That's okay. They all know that I can't close. I just like write an essay and then I'm like, and that's the end. Image description. So, thank you for...
Image description, 2 people.
2 people. Super cute. Like the cutest ever. One of them with cute multicolored hair.
A lot of color, and another with absolutely none.
Exactly that. One of them with maximum color, and the other one looks like a ninja crossed with a Duck Dynasty man. But thank you for listening to the rambles that we have to say. If you have questions or comments or things that you want to talk to us about in the comments, maybe both of us can give some answers, because he does actually have admin privileges to the occupational therapist page, although it's all me so far, but maybe I'll let him answer something.
Yeah.
If you got a question for Mr. the occupational therapist, go ahead and ask it. We'll see if there's anything else we have to say. But thank you for listening for so much of our rambles, and see you next time.